is a meeting of the City of Sylvania Streets Committee. The meeting tonight is to discuss a potential scooter program. Tonight in attendance, we have all members of the committee and all members of council, as well as a number of representatives from the administration and the community. And we have Michael Covado. Is that correct, Michael?
Yes, you say it better than me.
From Bird Scooters. And what's your title there?
I am the territory manager for the Central Region. I work with the Revenue and Partnerships team.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. The way this will work in my mind is that I understand you have a presentation, and we'll let you go ahead with that. And then we'll have an opening for questions from members of council and questions from members of the community. So with that being said, I would pass it over to you and go ahead. If you need to share screen, do whatever you have to do.
So much. Appreciate you having me this evening, members of council, members of the committee. Look forward to speaking with you. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. As was mentioned a moment ago, I work with the Revenue and Partnerships team here at Bird. We are a shared electric mobility company specializing in what they call micromobility. Those are the vehicles that are best suited for trips that are less than 5 miles, which account for about 60% of the trips within the United States. We were first founded in 2017 and have since expanded to over 400 cities globally and are the only dedicated micromobility company to be publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. As you see here, our mission is to generally improve the quality of life in cities by providing affordable, clean transportation options that can help reduce congestion and improve air quality. The way that our system works is very simple. Bike share systems you might already be familiar with. Individuals will download a mobile application on their phone, see one of our scooters either via the map functionality on the mobile application or throughout the community itself. They create an account, during which period they undergo a safety tutorial where they are taught safe riding behavior as well as proper parking etiquette, and depending on certain circumstances are even required to pass a quiz to prove that they have paid attention to that tutorial. They then scan the device that they have seen to unlock it, take it where they need to go, usually somewhere around 10 minutes away, before hitting a button to end their ride. Somebody else comes along, does the exact same thing. So it is multiple short trips per day per device. Functionally, when you take a look at the data, and we will be providing real-time data dashboards to the city so that they will be able to make this determination independently, what you are actually seeing here is a public transportation system. All of our vehicles are equipped with a front headlight, running lights, tail lights, and brake lights to ensure that there is visibility in the evening and night hours. They are speed capped at 15 miles per hour, which is about roughly what your average amateur bicyclist travels at. Every single one is also equipped with a safety decal, which you're seeing an example of on the right-hand side, which reminds people of or riders, I should say, of the key safety requirements that we encourage, as well as provides 24/7 contact information, whether you are a rider or not, in the form of a telephone number and email address. I do wish to be clear, we are not seeking any investment or any subsidy from the City of Sylvania. This is something where we cover all the upfront and ongoing costs simply because we feel that the volume of microtransactions that we will see will be sufficient for us to be sustainable long term. Instead, what we forge is a very collaborative partnership through our dedicated account manager, an individual who will be capable of working with any of the administrative staff here in the city to ensure that we are, I apologize, I left my phone in the other room and somebody's contacting me. I hope nobody can hear that. To ensure that there is always a point of contact that all individuals within the city will be able to reach out to in order to be able to adjust any of the operational parameters that we have delivered on here. What we have found to be particularly effective is to actually partner with members of the community to manage the day-to-day field operations, meaning the deployment, the rebalancing, which is just a fancy word for moving the scooters from locations where people have ended their ride, as well as the recharging of the scooters, as every single one of these is electric. What this means is the city has the confidence of knowing that there is somebody locally based who can respond extremely rapidly if there ever is the need to correct an issue, and is proactively checking on every single unit multiple times per day. For the city of Sylvania, what that means is, or based off the fleet size we would predict, you're actually looking at probably somewhere between 2 and 4 individuals. What this also means is because we operate on a revenue share basis, the majority of the net revenue actually generated on the rides stays within the community of Sylvania. In terms of how this can impact the local community, almost 60% of our trips do end in front of a small business. The average take home for one of our fleet managers, the individuals who are handling the day-to-day field operations, is a little over $70,000. In an area like Sylvania, where you don't have any other competition with other shared mobility providers, certainly I think there is the potential for that to be quite a bit higher. Finally, Emory University released a study earlier in 2021, where they found that over a 6-month period, every single individual e-scooter contributed $1,100 in additional spending at local businesses, particularly within the food and beverage industry, that would not have been spent otherwise. What that means is, just for the sake of keeping my math nice and easy, if you have 100 scooters, you are looking at over the course of the year, perhaps close to $250,000 in additional spending within local businesses. So certainly something that can help stimulate the local economy and encourage trips that might otherwise not be taken. Because we were the first company in the world to introduce shared electric scooters, that does give us an opportunity to really refine our technology. We have extremely sophisticated geofencing and geospeed controls. Every single one of our scooters is equipped with a GPS unit that allows us to control where it can and cannot go, and at what speed it travels at within particular locations, all digitally. These are geofencing and geospeed parameters. We were also the first company to introduce a feature that we call helmet selfies to encourage safe riding. If a user snaps a photograph of themselves wearing a helmet at the end of their ride, they receive a credit to their next ride. This is done in combination with an ongoing helmet campaign that we have throughout the entirety of the United States, where a rider can request a helmet be delivered directly to their door via our website or mobile application for no charge other than $9.95 shipping and handling. It's got a pretty cool look to it, little bird logo. I'm biased, but I am a fan. Finally, our parking management is second to none. What this allows us to do is create incentivized or encouraged areas where individuals should park the scooters either during special events or particular time periods, as well as dedicated parking or designated parking rather. If there is, for example, a parade, a street festival, anything along those lines where it might not be appropriate to have the scooters traveling within a particular location. Warm-up mode is available on some of our make models of scooters. This is a feature for individuals who are coming fresh to Bird and have not had any previous experience. It reduces the maximum speed of the device down to about 6 miles per hour, as well as the rate of acceleration until they get a little bit more familiarity and a little bit more confidence with the system, at which point it gradually increases up to that 15 mile per hour cap. Because a very substantial number of our users are regular commuters, we introduced our quick start feature. This learns from the behavior of the user when the individual is approaching a particular device that they are using it to commute to a particular destination, again, based off historic riding patterns, and allows them to avoid that typical flow of having to unlock the scooter via the phone. At the end of their ride, they are still required to photograph the scooter to prove that they have parked it appropriately. I know that there are likely to be a number of questions. I hope I've kept this presentation fairly brief and would love to address the specific concerns that the committee, council, or any members of the public might have here this evening.
Well, thank you. That was very informative. I know you touched on a couple of questions I had in the presentation, so I appreciate that. At this time, I'll open up to members of the committee or council that have any specific questions.
I have a question regarding this. Is Brian McCain, member of council. How does this program work in a population of size of Sylvania between 20 and 40,000, let's say?
Excellent question. The smallest community that we operate within has about 2,500 individuals, and certainly they still see the benefit of having shared mobility as a public transportation system. Given the geographic size of Sylvania, I think that this could easily replace a significant number of the individuals who are commuting within the city itself. As I mentioned, these are ideally suited for trips that are less than 5 miles. Sylvania being roughly 6 square miles, I think you could see quite a bit of intercommuting occurring.
Is there any study done before you open to an area or come into an area? Do you do that study?
There is a significant amount of analysis that we do prior to approaching a city, simply because, as I'm sure you can appreciate, there is a substantial investment on our side. I unfortunately would not be able to share all of the details, but I can certainly share some of the details simply because this is a competitive industry and some of the analysis that we do is still proprietary. However, what I can say is that considering the investment that we have done within the state of Ohio, I believe that the community would be very similar in terms of their rapid adoption of something like this, should they be similar to the other Ohio cities that we operate within. What I particularly find to be inspiring in terms of the city is the demographics, the geographic layout, as I mentioned, the geographic size, as well as the, I'm sorry, I had an additional note here, as well as the presence of the college.
Mr. Cavada?
Yeah.
Wait. There we go. Got the microphone on. Could you expand a little bit on the incentives you mentioned to encourage people to park within the designated areas?
Absolutely. We can, using some of the parking management features that we possess, create specific areas where an individual will receive a credit if they park within that particular zone. When ending their ride near that particular area, they will receive a pop-up notification encouraging them to go to this particular location instead, at which point they are then able to end their ride and receive that credit.
How much is the credit?
It's variable. Typically, we do something around 25 cents, can be up to 50 or $1, depending on circumstances. It is adjustable. We do have to balance, of course, since we are a for-profit business and the long-term sustainability of one of these systems is important. What that means is we have to ensure that we aren't giving money away too freely. Otherwise, it makes it very challenging for us to remain within the market.
So if they don't park in a designated area, you don't continue to charge them. The charge ends and they just don't credit?
Exactly. We also have the capacity to require that individuals go to a particular zone. So if there is a special event, they would have to go to a particular area to end their ride. Again, functionally, this is meant to be a point A to point B public transportation system. So encouraging individuals to have that freedom to be able to travel where they need to go would be very important to see the true benefit.
Michael, how many scooters do you think you'd want for a city like ours? What's the right number?
Excellent question. So too few scooters is just as bad as too many. What that means is we have to be able to find that right balance that people can reliably turn to these as their transportation option without overwhelming the community. Based off of the fluctuations in size within the population, you could probably support 250, maybe even 275 scooters. I think that's far too many to start. If we take a look at instead of having roughly 60 active scooters, doing a scaled rollout with the intention of maybe getting up to 75 or 80, I think you have enough density without overwhelming the community and certainly ensuring that this can be a reliable transportation option. Assuming that we deploy in groups of 3, you're talking about between 15 and 20 locations throughout the entirety of the city where they might be initially located. So certainly not enough to create any kind of concern around clutter. And
then just logistically, these locations, this is where you want people to park them when they're done, ideally?
Not necessarily. We have a very sophisticated machine learning algorithm that actually will predict where the scooters should be deployed based off of a number of different parameters. The longer we are operating within a particular community, the better it becomes in terms of knowing where the scooters should be positioned. To draw an example, you would need more scooters outside of the downtown core around 8 a.m. simply because individuals will probably need the scooters to get into work closer towards the downtown near the beginning of the day, whereas you might need more scooters around 4 to 6 p.m. closer to the downtown to allow individuals to get back out into the community. If this is a Friday and individuals are then meeting their friends for a coffee or a dinner or something like that, you redistribute them. This is where our local fleet managers come into play. They're checking on every single unit, usually once every couple of hours. They bring them back out to the locations that a machine learning algorithm has predicted out to some of the more external areas of the city, again, to allow for that transportation.
So when you're saying that they deployed or from a certain place, that could just be your local employee is lining up 6, 8, 10 scooters on a sidewalk at this place, and then they're just there. And it's not like you guys have built a piece of hardware there or infrastructure. Is that correct?
Correct. So we do everything digitally. What that means is that you never have to worry about anything being a nuisance or a hazard when it comes to snow clearing anything being installed within the public infrastructure. If there's any concerns in terms of, hey, we want to temporarily pause the service here, please remove all the scooters, allows for a very rapid temporary removal or permanent removal if things are simply not working out, candidly.
Got it.
The fleet managers handle any breakdowns, batteries going dead, et cetera.
That would depend on the nature of the maintenance required. Typical routine maintenance our fleet managers will be handling. If it's something to do with the battery, usually what we'll have them do is actually send it to one of our service centers and send a replacement unit. Again, it would depend on the specific nature of the issue. If a scooter is flagged as damaged, it is automatically taken offline. So any concern around safety means that riders will not have access to that device, regardless of whether somebody has come out to it and checked on it. When our fleet managers do check on every unit, they do perform a health check to make sure that they are in generally working order.
Michael, I have a couple quick questions, and two of them, actually I've got a few. Two of them might be repeats because they probably were stated in the beginning of your remarks and I missed it. How long have you been in business, and how many communities are you currently providing scooters in?
Excellent question. So we were first launched in 2017. We are present in over 400 cities globally with a fleet of, I'm sorry, I don't want to lie, but I know it's in the hundreds of thousands in terms of the number of devices that we have available.
So my next question might be a little bit more difficult if you've got hundreds of thousands of bikes, but I would suspect you're tracking this kind of data. Can you give me some sense of how many bicycles or scooters get ruined on a monthly or annual basis, and how many accidents there are on a monthly and annual basis? And thirdly, how many problems you have on sidewalks with scooters? 3 questions.
So let me address the first one in terms of the number of devices that get damaged. We have a catch-all term for scooters that get stolen, go missing, get vandalized beyond repair. We call it churn. In 2021, our churn rate hovered between 0.42 and 0.44%. What that means for Sylvania is, depending on circumstances, you might not lose a single device throughout the entirety of the year. In terms of safety, multiple studies have been done independently. So the city of Portland, the city of Miami, the city of Austin, each did studies on e-scooter safety, as did the International Transport Forum, which is a collection of transit agencies from over 60 different member countries. Every single one of those found parity in the incident rate for injuries on e-scooters as the incident rate for injuries on bicycles, meaning e-scooters are going to be about as safe as bicycles. In terms of issues with sidewalks, that one's a little bit harder to track. What I can say instead is, depending on the community, the response time is a little bit more variable. With a geographic size, the size of Sylvania, it does allow us to be incredibly responsive with our fleet managers. Given that we are going to be operating a smaller fleet, you're likely to see this happen more between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., with any issues prioritized the next day that come in after those hours.
Thank you very much. Are there any communities that are close to the city of Sylvania that are currently using your product?
There are a number of communities within Ohio that we are partnered with. The closest one, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find geographically, perhaps Cleveland, but I believe we have something closer. If you give me one moment, I can pull up the full list.
Okay.
Are you in Ann Arbor, Michigan?
We are not in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
While you're pulling that out, I hope you can do 2 things at once. Have there been any communities who have started with your program and after you're chosen to not renew the lease, or I guess how many communities have chosen not to renew the contract?
Yes, excellent question. During the early days of some of the deployments of these scooters, I think there were a lot of challenges and a lot of operational know-how that we needed to obtain. During that period, there were certainly communities that asked us to either temporarily hold or permanently hold. We have actually reestablished relationships with a wide range of them. I'm not aware of any community that we have been asked to leave within the last 2 years.
Thank you.
In terms of communities within the state, Mount Vernon, Tiffin, Springfield, certainly a number of communities around Cleveland. Warren, I would say Tiffin is maybe the closest, simply because of population size and variability, although there are obviously certain circumstances that are a little bit different.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay. So Couple additional questions, because, I've been checking them off my list from all the other questions that the other members have asked. What's the age limit to operate one of these, Mike?
We require that our users be 18 plus. They are required to agree to terms and conditions page, and there is a credit card check that's done. We also have the capability of doing an ID verification if that becomes a concern. We typically advise against keeping it or implementing it at the onset, as it tends to discriminate against some of the population that might need these the most, but might not have access to a driver's license or state identification.
So I'm confused. How do you determine if somebody's 18 or not? I'm confused by that.
So we do a credit card verification at the onset when an account is created. And as I mentioned, we can actually do an ID verification or do ID verification campaigns to ensure that individuals are submitting valid photo identification to prove that they are 18 plus.
Okay. You talked about the geolocation piece of this. Have you had issues with the scooters being run from a person by a person's private property, and then the scooters dropped on private property, and then the person who from your company has to go onto that private property to secure the device? How's that work?
It tends to be a bit of a rarity. If an individual is going onto private property using one of these devices, it's typically their own private property and they're simply commuting home. There's then the implicit consent to allow the fleet manager to retrieve that unit simply because that is part of the parameters and the terms and conditions that they would agree to. It doesn't tend to happen that frequently. Also, if an individual is trying to take this onto private property, they're likely going to be continue to incur a charge on their credit card simply because, depending on the circumstances, they might not be able to actually end their ride. So there's a number of ways to disincentivize it.
Right. And what is you mentioned the charge on the credit card, but you weren't real specific. How much does it cost per minute, per hour, per whatever? And does it vary based upon, is this like Uber where, hey, if everybody's wanting to use these things, it's $20 an hour versus $1 an hour if nobody wants to use these things?
Great question. So no, there is no surge pricing. It's always a very consistent rate. And I apologize, you're right, I didn't mention that. We charge $1 to unlock plus a certain number of cents per minute, depending on different city factors, usually between 39 and 42. Based on the geographic size and the predictable kind of commuting patterns that we would expect within Sylvania, you're looking at roughly $5 for the average cost. If you are using some of the features that we use to incentivize safe riding, you can drive that cost down further. That actually also segues very nicely into our community pricing program. So you have probably the most robust one within the industry. We offer 50% off for those who qualify due to low income status, 50% off for veterans, for senior citizens. We're continuing to offer free rides for all frontline workers for the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic as a way to give back to the community. So it can be a very affordable option for a number of individuals.
So if an individual drops the scooter in the wrong location and it's on a sidewalk somewhere and somebody is walking down the sidewalk, minding their own business, and trips and falls on one of these things, who is getting sued other than you?
Very good question. We can't control who gets sued, but we can control the levels of protection that we can afford to the city. So within the agreement that I sent to city staff earlier, there includes some indemnification language within it. Further to that, all of our riders are required to agree to a terms and conditions page that includes a release for the municipality to the extent applicable by state law. Finally, we would actually add the city as an additional insured on our GL, our general liability policy. So if there is a claim, our policy will trigger.
And what's your general liability policy in dollar figures?
It is substantial. I believe within the agreement it is that we have that, or the agreement language that I submitted to city staff, it was 1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate.
If you have 400 cities, 2 million aggregate doesn't sound like much to me, Mike.
Per city.
Per city. Okay. One question that I'm still a little confused on. I know your people that the person you're going to have locally is going to handle the recharging. Where is this going to happen?
It'll occur on private property outside of the public eye.
And how often, I mean, is this something where if you have 60 of these, there's going to be 20 of them that are going to be recharging and the other 40 are going to be at service? How does that work?
Usually something along those lines. If we're talking about 60 active units, you're probably looking at closer to around 80 actually being available, or sorry, 80 actually being located within the city's jurisdictional boundaries, simply because some will be charging to ensure continuity of service.
And obviously, you've operated these in other cold locations, particularly if you've done it in Cleveland. So what do you do with winter weather and in the operation of these scooters? Because this seems to me like anything else in slick and in snowy times where this could be a problem.
Great question. So we have a whole process that we engage in where we actually take all the scooters off the streets, bring them to a centralized location, rack and stack them. We call it Hibernating the Scooters because our company name is Bird and we use way too many animal puns. Haha, it's cute. They're kept all in private property until the weather is more appropriate in the springtime, at which point they are redeployed. By working with local members of the community, what that means is that we can actually extend some of the operating season if we are having some unseasonably warm weather in, call it November, December, where it's 58 degrees for whatever reason.
And when you do this, one of the things you talked about was having a university in the town, which obviously we do. How does, because a lot of the students have access to an account through the university. Is there a way for them to interact without burning mom and dad's credit card?
We do have prepaid vouchers that can be used. There is a cash option where you can buy credits through participating CVS. There are a number of options. We've worked with universities significantly throughout the entirety of the U.S., so I'm sure we could create something unique for the university if that were required.
And I just have a couple more. I apologize because I'm asking a bunch of questions here. But one question I have in regards to the geolocation, how tight is that? I mean, and who determines what line gets drawn? Is it the city? Is it your organization? How is that determined?
Typically, we would use the jurisdictional boundaries for the operating area. We can make certain adjustments and work very collaboratively with the city to make sure that if there is any kind of fine tuning that needs to be done, we are making sure we're doing that with city input. In terms of the level of accuracy, it'll be about as accurate as your typical GPS. There are certain things we can do to help to help improve it, but generally speaking, again, about as accurate as a typical GPS. So you might see 5 to 10 feet of variability depending on circumstances. If you are in what they call an urban valley, sorry, I'm getting a little too technical. I don't think you'll see that in Sylvania.
And I guess this is my last question. We have what's called a DORA here in Sylvania, the designated outdoor refreshment area, which allows people to drink alcoholic beverages inside a limited geographic area in the downtown footprint. How does somebody, I'll use the word drinking and scootering, how do you deal with that liability issue?
So customizably, depending on the city's preference, we actually have a feature that we've introduced called Safe Start. So typically after we say 9 p.m., for example, an individual will actually have to pass a brief cognitive test to prove that they are in at least an okay state of mind before the scooter will unlock. I acknowledge it's not perfect, but it is another barrier to entry in that respect. We can also limit the operating hours if it does become a problem, and certainly do a rollback during particular events if we think that there's going to be a significant level of drinking.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I'm curious about where these things are going to be parked. Have you looked at the city of Sylvania and identified the sorts of areas where you would have these stations where you would drop them off and pick them up?
So to be clear, there are no stations that would need to be installed, and the footprint of each unit is quite narrow. So we typically deploy in what they call the boulevard strip or the furniture zone, that area between the sidewalk and the curb where you might find, for example, a row of planters or a set of streetlights, something along those lines. So outside of the pedestrian right-of-way while still being accessible. The thing that these are most similar to would be a very short, very narrow bicycle, just to provide some context.
So you can basically pick these up wherever they are and leave them wherever you choose.
Knowing confidently that an individual is going to be checking on every unit that is used and bringing it back to a location where it's, one, going to look good, two, not be in the middle of the sidewalk, and three, most likely to be used again. That third point is very important because that means that it's delivering benefit to the community. Individuals are seeing the need for this transportation option. And not to sound too mercenary, but I'd rather be transparent, it also means that we receive more ride revenue. So it incentivizes us to ensure that we are running a clean operation.
So you haven't identified those locations specifically in our city as of today?
So there would be no designated locations unless we were collaborating with the city to establish those. What I would say is the point of these systems, though, is to ensure that people can get from point A to point B. We move the scooters around depending on where people need them. So they're not supposed to always be in the same location. What I mean by that, for example, is at the end of class, you probably want a handful more close to the university simply because students will need them. Whereas on a Saturday, you might not necessarily need that simply because you won't find as many students on campus.
Okay.
Michael, Lindsay Stone here again. Quick question. We have a river trail, a bike trail in Sylvania, along with a number of bike lanes and different areas in which bikes are encouraged. Have other cities encouraged these to be sharing space with bikes, or have there been issues with that?
State law, generally speaking, boils down to treat them like you would a bicycle. So unless specifically posted, no motorized vehicles, they should be treated with the same type of regulation as a bicycle in general, meaning keep them in bike lanes, keep them on trails as long as they are paved and allow for motorized units, keep them to the right side of roads.
Thank you.
So, do you have any data around usage percentage? So, for example, I know you're in different communities as small as 2,500, but is it being used by 1% of the population, 20% of the population? Any idea there?
Great question. It varies depending on the size of the fleet. The size of the fleet that we're talking about means that obviously only a small percentage will have access. We'll actually be sharing all of that data in real time with the city. So you'll be able to make that determination independently. You'll be able to see the number of unique riders, meaning what percentage of the population is using these, the number of trips that are taken on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, the start and end points. So you'll be able to actually see the commuting patterns, heat mapping, meaning the most popular types of routes or destinations rather, number of regular commuters, and a whole bunch of other data. So you won't have to take our word for it. You'll actually be able to see all of this independently and make that kind of determination. And we can kind of give a baseline, say this is above average for similar types of communities. This is significantly above average. This is below average, etc.
Great. Now, I know there's a number of members of the community here that at this point, I would open up the meeting to anybody from the community. If anybody has any questions or wants to make a statement for the record, I would invite anybody step up to the podium. If there's anybody here that would want to. Yes, sir. Come up to the podium and please state your name and address just for the record, please.
My name is Stephen Risher. I live at 6044 North Main here in Sylvania. I am a user of the University of Toledo Rec Center about 5 to 6 days a week, and I have seen these scooters on the campus for the past 2 years. I personally consider them a nuisance. I'll tell you why. People don't ride them on the streets there, they ride them on the sidewalks. When I come up to the rec center, I have to look both ways down the long sidewalk to look for either somebody on a bicycle barreling through or a scooter. I do think I have a lawful right to make a turn into the driveway if the driveway's clear, but not with those scooters close by, because I do not want one of them hitting the side of my car and creating an injury accident. So that's one thing. I don't think there's any safety enforcement by the owner of the scooters or the campus police at any time, because like I said, I see them on the sidewalks most of the time. So let's come out to Sylvania and compare that. How's an elderly person a family with small children, or someone walking a pet on the sidewalk going to have to deal with somebody that's driving one of these on one of our sidewalks. It's going to be a problem. Someone's going to get hit and hurt. Out here in Sylvania, the streets have variable speed limits. On the campus, it's 25 miles an hour. How is one of these scooters going to deal with Monroe Street and heavy traffic at 35 plus miles per hour? You're looking for a problem in an accident. It's a hazard for both the scooter drivers and the motorists alike. As you mentioned, Doug, in the paper the other day, the downtown of Sylvania, it's very small. The sidewalks are narrow in the main block. It's occupied by trees, potted bushes, park benches, for other furniture. Someone walking down there and here comes a scooter, it's just, someone's going to get hit again. It's just not a good match. So another thing that I'm saying about why they are a nuisance, on the UT campus, they're parked everywhere. I don't consider it being parked everywhere. I think they're dumped everywhere. They're parked on the sidewalk. You have to walk around them. They're parked in pairs. They're parked in the grass. I've seen them parked in the parking lot, occupying the parking space that's meant for a motor vehicle. Two of them are left there in a pair. Off campus, I've seen them parked on the curb islands at Door and Secor. I don't know how anybody would want to take a scooter from there and try to ride down that street. It's very fast. And you're risking your life. I go through Otto Hills every day to get to UT. Last year, I saw one sitting on the sidewalk halfway down Indian Road. It sat there for 3 days. Eventually, it got knocked over into the grass, and I don't know. Maybe the campus police called, the village police called and asked them to pick that up. This past Saturday evening, I was going down to the art museum for the concert. I saw a scooter parked on the sidewalk east of St. Francis High School, almost to Parkside Boulevard. And today, while I was on the campus, I saw one at the end of the bike trail at 10:30 in the morning, and it was still there at 12:45 when I was leaving. So there's not a timely pickup of these scooters. They could be there for quite some time. These scooters, the way they're parked, I look at this like an abandoned shopping cart, 3 blocks from a grocery store like Kroger. So occasionally you see that here in Sylvania. I consider it unsightly, not parked as a marketing scheme. It's unsightly for a bike or a scooter just to be left there abandoned for someone else to get or pick up. It doesn't look right. So, and my question is, who is really going to use these scooters in Sylvania? Adults, like on the campus, or more likely kids? And the problems that may go with them. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Is there anybody else in the community wishing to make a comment or has any questions? Please forward. Again, just your name and address for the record would be great.
My name is Harry Anthony Weiss, 4761 Suriname Lane, 13th of June. I'll be here 34 years. Can I ask him a question?
Please, by all means.
Okay. Liability. What about the city's liability? How many times do people have accidents and include the local community in the being sued?
Excellent question. So as I mentioned to the members of the committee and the council earlier, within the agreement that we possess with the city, there is some indemnification language. We cannot control who people name in any kind of lawsuit. People will always scatter shot. That's simply what they do. But we have indemnification language within the agreement that we have within the municipality. Our terms and conditions page includes a release agreed to by the rider for the municipality to the extent applicable by state law. And we add the city as an insured on our general liability policy. So even if there is a claim, our policy will be the one that triggers.
But they still do get sued, have to go to the court and defend themselves.
Not necessarily, no. Again, with all of the parameters that I've just described, that is what helps prevent that.
Police officer, sir, is it required to wear a helmet on a motorized vehicle in the street? By the state, to the state? So
I can actually answer this question. It's not required by state law.
it's not required, okay, that takes care of that portion. Where do you park? We've covered that, needless to say, parking in the streets, another thing we don't want to see happen. How far can a person go? As far as they want?
So the range on the scooter is 30 miles, but there is a GPS unit that controls where the scooter can and cannot go. If they cross one of the digital boundaries that we draw, the scooter slows down to about 1.5 miles per hour, starts beeping and flashing at them. They receive a notification on their phone telling them to go back to where they're supposed to be, and they are unable to end their ride, meaning they continue to incur a charge on their credit card until they go back to where they're supposed to be.
If I'm a person who likes to have one of these for use and will take it to work every day, 8 hours a day, basically round trip, 8.5 hours, what would my cost be? If you could probably give me a package or something like that. Give me something daily or weekly or whatever.
So the purpose is to actually take multiple short trips. What that means is that, say you're commuting to work, your first trip will only be about 10 minutes. You hit a button to end their ride, or your ride. Maybe it costs you about $4 to get home. You do the exact same thing, knowing reliably that our fleet manager will be deploying the scooters in the locations where they're supposed to be, so that individuals can actually return back to wherever it is they need to go from work.
Okay, but you said the average cost was usage was around $5. But if someone is going to be used, that's divided by people who only use it by 1 hour versus someone who uses it for 9 hours in one day. That's why I asked the question, what would it cost to use it for 8 hours plus?
I believe there's a bit of a misunderstanding. Nobody will be using these for 8 hours plus. That's simply not how the system works. People use these for, again, typically around 10 minutes at a time. If you wanted to rent it for 8 hours, we do have certain passes and like weekly passes and the like that we've introduced in other cities. It would be extremely unlikely that that is the way that individuals would see this. This is more like again, this is not a recreational option. This is more of a public transportation option, with the intent being take that short trip, make sure that you get to where you need to go.
Okay, and last but least, as far as liability, your liability, you said $1 million per accident?
1 million per occurrence. That's what we have within the agreement language that we submitted to the city staff for the time being.
Okay. In this day of trials, if you will, some people with permanent accidents because the wheel came off, that's a close figure. And last but not least, you mentioned bicycles and this. If we are going to use this vehicle in the bicycle lane, how often is a bicycle going to have to pass that person in that lane? Because this vehicle goes how fast? How fast does the scooter go?
We cap the scooters at 15 miles per hour, which is roughly what your average amateur bicyclist travels at.
All right. Take care of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie Capolini, 5648 Parkwood, Executive Director for the Downtown Sylvania Association.
You're charged with any traffic offense, from speeding to suspended license.
And I was in Nashville a couple weekends ago and rode, maybe it was one of your scooters, maybe it was someone else, but probably rode 20 minutes, it was $15. So 50 cents to wear a helmet at the end. I don't think that really matters. I just don't think there's enough room in downtown Sylvania. Our sidewalks are skinny. We don't really have bike lanes. We have a lot of work to do. Like, I don't feel like this is a no, we're never going to have it, but I feel like we're not ready for it yet. We don't really have any bike lanes in our downtown. We don't have a space between where the cars park and the businesses. The sidewalk is skinny. The scooters, will they end up in parking spaces? People are already irritated. They can't find a space to park. So that's my main concern, that we just don't have room. We really don't have a lot of bike lanes. And I'm sure you've already imagined it going down Monroe Street. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may offer a suggestion here, we've worked with a number of downtown business associations, and forgive me, what I was trying to do was look up. I didn't have a chance to hear your name. Is it Ms. Scott?
Katie.
Katie, forgive me. Katie, we've actually worked with a number of downtown business associations to identify with them the appropriate locations where these scooters should be deployed and create some of the designated parking areas that I described. We'd love to do the same with you to make sure that we are encouraging people to use these in an appropriate way that is not going to present a nuisance and not going to present any kind of frustration for the local businesses. This can be an extremely good thing for local businesses in terms of encouraging additional users. And if we create the right environment that allows people to use them without negatively impacting people who are using an alternative means of transportation, such as an automobile, certainly I think there can be some significant benefit. With respect to the bike lanes that you identified, I think Sylvania is substantially more bike friendly than a lot of the communities that we operate within. One of the benefits that the community in general has is not quite a grid structure, but certainly a significant number of parallel and perpendicular routes that individuals can utilize to avoid going on some of those main roads. If you do not see an individual using a bicycle on some of the roads that you've described, I certainly don't think that you can expect to see an individual using a scooter simply because the experience is going to be too similar. Instead, somebody will find a parallel road, maybe a block up, before turning in where they need to go.
Okay. I guess one last thing to try to wrap this up is maybe for Leslie, from the administration standpoint, legally. I know you referenced in an email the ORC section about, what do they call these, low-speed micro mobility devices. So going forward, if these scooters were to appear in Sylvania, what exactly would be needed?
As far as legislation,
Yes.
the city council will have to approve the agreement with Bird if you choose to do so. And secondly, you can limit where they are permitted to operate. And that was one thing that the ORC specifically provided for just last year, which was a kind of a negotiation between the scooter providers and local governments.
Got it. So we would need to get together, draw the geographic boundary,
Right.
go over the agreement, and that's what would legally need to happen next.
Right.
Okay. Well, I think we've certainly answered a lot of questions, got a lot of information tonight. I don't believe there's any decisions need to be made right now. I'm sure more questions will arise over the coming days and weeks. And I assume, Michael, we can contact you if anything else comes up? And I think, Bill, you have his contact information, right? So he'll get that out to everybody. And I think from here, the committee will have to meet again and see if there's interest. And if so, then we'll have to start talking about borders and things like that. Is there any other last minute questions or comments from anybody before we wrap this thing up and move on to the regular council meeting?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Michael, thank you again for your time. And I'm sure we will be in touch shortly. Thank you.